And I've been thinking about this kind of eulogy for the Ron Rivera era for a while now, obviously. One, you got to have it ready. That's to be super morbid about it. If you know someone's going to die, you go ahead and write the eulogy if you're speaking at the funeral. Or what's the thing, Anthony, what's the thing that they write in newspapers called? Why can't I think of the word right now? Every single human being listening right now is screaming at the radio with the word that you write about the famous person that dies.
Article.
What?
Starts with a B.
The
biopsy.
Not a biopsy. When someone dies.
I don't know.
An obituary.
An obituary.
Yeah. Wow. That's the word that I'm looking for, / we're looking for. That kind of has a B sound at the beginning.
I guess.
I was trying to help you out.
Thank you.
Because you didn't do much to help yourself.
I
mean, neither did I, but anyway, the point is, the reason they have the obituaries ready when someone dies is because they write them ahead of time. Okay, enough of that. I do think that, like, line one of the Rivera era obituary, the eulogy, if you will, is that this was a man who coached a football team not very well during arguably the most turbulent time any NFL franchise has ever had. And most of that turbulence was not anything that Ron Rivera could have done anything about other than not take the job in the first place. And I do think that is fair enough of criticism, quote unquote, air quotes that criticism, to include, because he did at the end of the day sign up to work for Daniel Snyder. And that is something that he can never escape. That is something that always is going to be true. At the end of the day, while there was way more chaos and way more things that he had to deal with than anybody could have reasonably expected, because he didn't know that there were congressional investigations and all these types of things coming down the pike. Perhaps he could have guessed based off of the terrible reputation that Snyder and his predecessors, Ron's predecessors, had in terms of how they acted and the types of people that they worked with and employed and how they acted. Perhaps he could have guessed, but no, reasonably, you didn't think you'd have to deal with that. And then, of course, nobody knew in January of 2020 that by March of 2020, our world would be forever changed because of COVID. Ron, obviously, outside of Snyder, never knew that he'd have to deal with cancer. It's something that you hope no one ever has to deal with. You know, the fight for a cure marches on with hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars invested for a reason. Because cancer's terrible. And Ron had to deal with that. He was really sick. And that's worth mentioning when you write this obituary for the Rivera era. But at the end of the day, you have decisions you have to make. There are, like, no matter the circumstances, you got draft picks, right? Who do you take? That is done not entirely outside of the context of those other factors, but mostly. And whatever factors exist there are almost entirely the same for every team. So, to be less hypothetical, Ron Rivera takes Chase Young out with the second overall pick. Probably slightly influenced by Snyder, because Snyder had basically personally handpicked Dwayne Haskins the year before. And he did never get the chance to sit down with Chase one-on-one and, like, stare at him and do the Ron Rivera human thing. And maybe if he had, he would have been like, I don't know about this guy. And said whatever happened over Zoom. There's not the workouts. There's not the full whatever, because it's 2020 and it's COVID. So maybe he would have sat down even with Justin Herbert or Tua Tagovailoa and been like, I know this young kid's supposed to be good, but, like, that quarterback's going to be our guy. That's going to change our franchise. Dwayne didn't show me enough. Dan, you gave me all this power. I know that's your boy, but, like, we got to go in a different direction. Maybe that happens, but it didn't. And every other team had the same opportunities to talk to those players. Same Zooms, same everything. So ultimately, I think the failures of Ron as a football coach come down to the decisions that he did make, not the circumstances around it. And the fact is that as a football coach, or maybe even not as a football coach, as a head coach, as someone who does a lot of managing, and someone who took the job that he didn't have to take of president of football operations, he could have been like, Dan, I appreciate your trust in me, but that's a bad idea. And Josh Harris today laid out why it's a bad idea. Because those are 2 80-hour-a-week jobs. And there's not 160 hours for one man in a week to do them. And so he could have said no, but he accepted that job. He took that personnel thing. And ultimately, when the name came up, Washington football team or Washington Commanders in the NFL draft during Ron's time, he selected the wrong players a lot. He seemed to lack a vision of what the actual football team wanted to be. When he spent a lot of money in free agency, it didn't go well. And even the stuff that he's supposed to be great at, the culture, the leadership, all that kind of stuff, I thought it was fairly interesting today that 2 of the veteran leaders that he brought in that were Ron guys were the 2 most critical guys of Eric Bieniemy on his offense, Charles Leno and Logan Thomas. Those are supposed to be the vets, the leaders. And when Jahan Dotson's a young guy talking about we need we need better leadership, and then your veteran leaders are like the nicest thing they can say about your offensive coordinator, who was supposed to be transformative for your franchise, is he was consistent. He was the same guy every day. Not, I loved working for him. Then that's not great. That's a bad misread of what you need. It's a bad misread of the situation. And so ultimately the words that I keep coming back to are this. Lack of cohesion. That phrase. We're a zone team. We're a man team. We're a team that's built around our front four. We're a team that blitzes. It was an ever-moving target, and they never hit it. By the way, offensively, even worse, right? We're a pass team. We're a run team. We're drafting running backs. We're building a running-based offensive line. We hire Eric Bieniemy. And Scott Turner went through multiple machinations of what he seemed like he was chasing as well. And at any given point, Ron could have been like, this is the vision. Stay in the lines. And he never did. He let his coordinators cook, and they burnt the hell out of the meals. And that lack of cohesion, the favoritism / nepotism, it felt like at times, where like certain guys got longer leashes. Scott Turner, Jack Del Rio, certain players, Cameron Cheeseman, get these incredibly long leashes when Jamin Davis is getting benched and Emmanuel Forbes is getting benched. And, this is a thing that I can't definitively say is a terrible thing that Ron did, because maybe Davis and Forbes really deserved those benchings, and he was actually covering up for way worse behavior that would have been far more scandalous. And Ron covered up for that, and he was willing to eat the public crow. Maybe that's actually something we should be praising him for. But at the end of the day, that favoritism, that lack of a cohesive vision, those are the things that to me will forever define the Rivera era, even if you do have to whatever credit this is worth, also mention that he was very well respected as a good man who did take a lot. This phrase was used to me today, and I love it. He took a lot of charges, whether it was for Dan, whether it was for players. Like Ron would stand out there, plant his 2 feet, and just go, run my ass over. And whatever the call is, block charge, whatever, I'll stand in there, but someone else doesn't have to. And at a time in the franchise's history that they needed someone like that, he did it. I don't know that he always did it great. There's some blocks when there should, maybe someone else could have taken a charge, but he at least planted his feet and stood in there. And you never want that to be the best thing you can say about a coach. But at the very least, what it's done is set up the Commanders very well moving forward. He was a good steward of the franchise. And that has to be said, even if the football team that he built, its possible best accomplishment is it got left with clear decks, $75 million in cap space, and 3 picks in the top 40, including the number 2 overall pick, which is exactly where Ron started, the number 2 overall pick 4 years ago. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We will take your calls next. What is one word you would use to describe the Ron Rivera era? Your call is 301-230-0980. Next on the Team 980, the free Odyssey app, and streaming live on YouTube.